Hold on. Now. Okay.
1 second. Chaf Aleph Amud Aleph. So Rabbi Yehuda said that if an ohel is made not by human hands, it's not called an ohel, like a cave or something like that. Where did Rabbi Yehuda get that? Yolif oil mi mishkan. He learned a hekish from the word ohel as it relates to the mishkan. The pasuk says that if you're in the same room with a mace in the same ohel, the tumah is transmitted to you. Uksiv hasam by the mishkan. It says vayfrosis oil ala mishkan. He draped the mishkan with an oil. Now the mishkan was man-made. Malahalam bidei adam, avkan bidei adam. So from here, Rabbi Yehuda learns that for an ohel to be an ohel, it's got to be human-made. The Rabbanan said no. The Rabbanan said even something that's naturally made, but it has the status, has some kind of space where you could go and dwell there, it would have the status of an ohel. Rabbanan, how do they know that? Oil riba. In the parsha of Paraduma, where it talks about tumas oil, it uses the word oil many, many times to teach you that no matter what kind of oil it is, it will be an oil, even if it's not made by human hands. Does Rabbi Yehuda really say that an oil that's not made by human hands is not an oil? I'll show you that it's not correct. V'riminu. For the din of Paraduma, they made a lot of stringencies that it would be done b'tahara. And there were courtyards built in Yerushalayim on top of caves. The tachtem chalal mipnei kevra tahom. In the cave was a space of at least 1 tefach. The reason why that's important is because if there was any tumah in that cave, the tumah would only go to the top of the cave. It wouldn't go higher, because that space of a tefach prevents the tumah from going all the way up. So therefore, if you build houses on top of that cave, you would never be able to get tumah from the ground, from underneath the ground, up into the houses. So that was step 1. They would bring women who were already pregnant, put them into those houses, and they would give birth there as a method to guarantee that it would all be b'tahara. Umegadlos pneim sham lapara. They would raise their children there, and those children would grow up never exposed to tumah. And then when you had to take them somewhere, mivi and shvorim, they would bring oxen, va'al gabein delosois. On top of the oxen's back, they would put doors or big boards. V'tinoikos yoshvin al gabein. The children would sit on top of the oxen on the doors. The koisois shall even be a dayan. They would make cups out of stone, because stones are not mekabel tumah. Higiu lashiloyach. They got to the river where they would draw the water for the paraduma. Yardu l'sachamayim u'milu. They went down to the water and filled the cups with the water. The olive yashvalayim, and they would go back and sit on the paras because they would take them back. Rabbi Yossi Omer, they wouldn't get off of the cows. They would hang over on the side a string and lower the stone cups into the well. And that's because they were concerned if they got off, they might get tumah. Vitanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, lo yumavin dlasois el shvorim. You didn't need oil to be made by the boards on top of the oxen. The oxen themselves served as an oil because underneath the oxen is a space that you could sit under. And even though an ox is not a man-made thing, it still serves as an oil. That's the kasha. V'hashvorim, the oil shenasu b'dei adamu. Oil is certainly not made by human hands. The oxen. Uktani Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo yemavin dlasos el shvorim. For Rabbi Yehuda, that was enough. So that's a kasha what we said before that Rabbi Yehuda holds that there is no din oil by natural items. So Kiyos Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Lozer Moed Rabbi Yehuda Kimlo Egrov. That Rabbi Yehuda, when he says that an oil not made by human hands is not an oil, that's when they're very small openings, only as big of a tefach. But with a big area, as long as it's a big, like a big fist, and bigger than that, Rabbi Yehuda will be moideh that even a natural enclosure would have the status of an oil. Rabbi Yehuda would agree that by very deep holes or by rocks that had big holes, has a status of an oil. Now, Vaharedeles, a board which is very big, they would not bring the delis, they would bring the shvorim. From there you see a delis, which is not a binyan of long lasting, even though it's big, it doesn't make an oil. Abai says they didn't have. That's why they didn't have to bring the dlosos, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Just the shvarim alone was enough. And Rav Amar lo yemavim dlosos kol ikar. They never brought the doors. They died to shultina gasalov. If you brought a door to put on top of the shvarim, the children that were on top of it would think they would be very self-confident that they're going to remain tahor. So they might lean over on the way there and stick out their head or one of their limbs via tame bekevrat to home, and then some kind of tumah that was buried in the ground would go all the way up. Tanya Kavase de Rava, there's a brisa to support what Rav is learning. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, l'hayim avim dlasas kol ikar. They never brought boards, and they should die to shotin and kasal shama yotzi rosh echad mevar v'tame bekevrat to home, because they might stick their head or their limbs out and acquire tumah. They brought Egyptian oxen that were very wide. The children would sit on the backs of the oxen, and the stone cups would be in their hands. They went down and they drew the water, and that was enough. Now, v'haremita, now a bed, the yeshba kama egroifim, so there's a lot of space underneath the bed. Utna, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he started off in our Mishnah to say we used to sleep under the bed, and it was not a problem, even though it was in a sukkah, because according to the way Rabbi Yehuda was learning, a bed doesn't create an oil. But why shouldn't it create an oil? It is a certain size. It's got more than one egg rope. We said if it's more than one egg rope, it's always going to be an oil. So the Gemara answers, shiny mita hoil gabu asuya. Yeah, but a bed is made to sleep on top of. It has not been built for people to crawl underneath it to protect themselves from something. So the underneath the mita is not considered an oil because it wasn't made for underneath. An ox is also made to sit on. We don't care about what goes underneath the ox. So no, the ox, the shepherds, would sit underneath the ox. If it was very sunny, they would protect themselves from the sun underneath the ox. And if it was rainy, they would. So in a sense, the shore is also built that way. A bed is also protective of the shoes that you put underneath the bed. So that does have a function underneath it. So why shouldn't it have a din oil? Shvor is different because the skin of the stomach holds in the stomach. So it's not protective for underneath. It's protective of things inside the shore. I'll give you another answer. Why Rav Yehuda, a bed is a din of an oil, but in the case of in the sukkah, it was permitted. Different. So Iboy Sema, Rav Yehuda Tamid Omar, sukkah diras kva ba'inon. There's a debate in halacha whether a sukkah should be a temporary dwelling or a permanent dwelling. Rav Yehuda held that a sukkah had to be a permanent dwelling. And a bed is only a temporary dwelling. The sukkah oil keva, oil keva. By sleeping underneath a bed, which is a temporary oil or a temporary dwelling, does not negate the status of the sukkah that the bed is in from being a permanent oil. Reb Shimon also holds that a sukkah has to be a permanent dwelling. And v'asi oil aroy mevatel oil kva. And Reb Shimon held that if you were under a bed, you would not be mekayim the mitzvah sukkah. So how does he hold that an oil aroy of a bed is mevatel the status of an oil of a kva? Or is in? In fact, that's the point of the machlokes b'hapligi. Mar savar Reb Shimon osi oil aroy mevatel oil kva. Reb Shimon holds that a temporary oil can invalidate the status of the sukkah that requires it to be permanent. But Rabbi Yehuda, Mar Savar, Lo Asi Oil Aroy Mevatel Oil Kva. The temporary bed does not mevatel the status of the sukkah as a permanent oil. On Rab Shimon Ma'aseh B'Tevi Avdoi. Rab Shimon related the story of the servant of Tevi. Tanya Rab Shimon Mesichos or Shalom Gamliel, from the idle talk of Rabbi Gamliel, Lamadnu Shnei Dvar. We learned two divrei halacha. Lamadnu shavodim p'turim min hasukah. We learned the din that an eved has the same dinim as a woman, where just like a woman is potter for mitzvah saseh shazman grama, an eved likewise. And since sukkah is a mitzvah saseh shazman grama, it's tied to time. It's only on that specific time that you have to live in the sukkah. The avodim would be potter. And Tevi Avdo stuck himself under the bed because he knew he was potter, so he wanted to show under the bed that he's not being Makai Mitzvah Sukkah. What do you mean Mesichaso? From his speech. Just say from the words that he said. Because he's teaching us something else. Even if we hear a Talmud Chacham have idle chatter, we can learn many halachas from that. Shenemar v'aleu lo yibol. By Talmid Chachamim, not only are there fruit, which is the main point of a tree is to produce fruit. So the main part of a rav is drushes, but even the leaves, which are side issues. So even a Talmud Chacham's speech, we can also learn from. Mishnah. Hasoymech sukoso b'kari amita. If you lean the wall of your sukkah and the schach on top of the poles that are connected to a bed, so the Tanakama says ksheira. If the schach relies on the bed and cannot stand on its own, it would be possible. My time in Rabbi Yehuda. Pliga b'Rav Zera of Abba Bar Mama. Chadam of Neishein lo keva. The sukkah is going to be possible because Rabbi Yehuda holds the sukkah has to be a diras kva. A bed is not strong enough for the schach to rely, to lean on, in order to be meitzer, to create a diras kva. Since a bed is a kli, and the schach is leaning and relying on the kli, just like we learn, schach cannot be something that's makabel tumah. It gets invalidated because since it's relying on the bed, it's relying on something that's makabel tumah, and it will invalidate the schach. So, my binayu. What would be a nafkamina between these two svaras? You pounded some bars of iron, 4 corners, and you made schach on top of it. According to the Mandamar that says that the reason you couldn't put the schach on a bed is because you need a diras kva. So in this case, it would be a diras kva because it's metal. It's going to stand for a long time. However, a metal bar is a kli. You could use it to roast meat on. You could use it for other things. So it's a kli. So there, it would invalidate the schach because it's makabel tumah. Amar Abaya, lo yishonu ala soma. That's if you put the schach to rely on the bed in order for the schach to stand there. Aval sichach agava mita ksheira. But if you placed the bed as one of the walls of the sukkah, and then you put the schach on that would work. My time. Here you've incorporated the bed in the wall of the sukkah, made it a permanent sukkah. You're not putting the schach directly on the bed anymore. You're just using it sort of help the foundations of the wall. Okay. So tomorrow